from sunny Athens, and now he's living in Ron Garan. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing? How's everyone today?
Thank you very much, first, that we have the honor to have you this evening here in Athens by our Meteorite Museum in Greece, and to have the opportunity to discuss with you about so many things. It's a great opportunity for all the people here present tonight in Athens. I would like first maybe to make a small introduction to the public about your CV. If
Okay.
I have to say so that Ron is a highly decorated fighter pilot and test pilot. He's also an explorer, entrepreneur, and humanitarian. He believes that appropriately designed and target social enterprise can solve many of the problems facing our world. He's also currently the chief pilot for the Worldview Enterprises, a pioneering high-altitude and space company, bringing communications, technology, sensors, and passengers to the age of space. If now I have to speak shortly about numbers, about Ron Garan, I have to say only that he has traveled more than 71 million miles in space, 2,842 orbits around our planet, and this all in space-time, 178 days and 23 hours and 54 minutes. I get dizzy by the numbers here. Even if I'm a partly mathematician, this is too much for me. He had a total of 4 spacewalks that lasted 27 hours and 3 minutes in space. He has also participated by the undersea mission Nemo 9, where he has stayed by the bottom of the ocean for more than 18 days, 3 hours, and 40 minutes. That is a short CV about you. Now we can start our regular program. I will be glad also to have the opportunity to share with you some thoughts that we have. But let us first you speak about yourself.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that introduction. I really appreciate it. I'm speaking to you from Tucson, Arizona, in the U.S. right now, where I'm at Worldview headquarters. I work for a company called Worldview, which is a commercial spaceflight company. Specifically, what we do is high-altitude stratospheric balloons. So pretty much anything that you could think of doing with a satellite, we do with these high-altitude balloons. And I think it's going to really make a big difference in how we deal with things like natural disasters and weather predictions and climate modeling and communications and internet provision, and the list goes on and on. So it's really exciting. I'm really honored to be speaking to everybody at Athens. It just shows you just how far our technology has come, where we can have this conversation from so far away. So, as you heard, I got a couple of spaceflight missions, and I have an undersea mission. What all of these have in common is I think they've been very, very unique experiences that have given me a very unique perspective on this planet I call home, and that's part of what I speak to you about tonight is this. I think our perspective of where we live has changed, and maybe just the stage. I'll tell you a story about my return to Earth on my last mission. And so my last mission was my third NASA mission. My first mission was, as you heard, living on the bottom of the ocean for 3 weeks, and that was an incredible experience. It really gave me a new appreciation for our planet's oceans and for the interdependencies of life, especially in the ocean. But that interconnectedness and that interdependency expands out to every life form on the planet. We are all reliant on the same life support systems. When we're on the space station, we have life support systems that keep us alive, and we have similar life support systems on the Earth, and so it gives you a very big appreciation of that. My first space mission was on the Space Shuttle Discovery. I flew a 2-week construction mission to the International Space Station. We brought up the Japanese laboratory, and it's the largest part of the space station. We installed that onto the space station. And on that mission, I did 3 spacewalks in support of that construction. And then on my last mission, I flew on Russian Soyuz spacecraft from Kazakhstan, launched to the space station and spent basically 6 months in space, living and working with the International Space Station, doing all kinds of science experiments. I did do another spacewalk while I was up there. During our mission, the last 2 space shuttle missions flew. So the last flight of Endeavour and the last flight of Atlantis, which Atlantis was the last space shuttle to fly, came up and docked with the space station. But when my mission was over and it was time to come back, my 2 Russian crewmates and I put our spacesuits on, and we floated through the hatch into our Soyuz spacecraft, and we wiggled ourselves into our seats. It's like 3 guys in the trunk of a car. It's a very, very small space. We closed the hatch, we undocked from the space station, and I remember looking out I had window right by my head, and remember straining and looking as hard as I could to the space station as we backed away, because I knew in all likelihood I would never see this beautiful sight again. And after we backed away from the space station, we did a couple of orbits, a couple of laps around the planet, and when we crossed the south tip of South America, we fishtailed the spacecraft around and pointed the engines backwards. And we fired our engines while we were pointing backwards, which slowed us down. It slowed us down just enough to enter the upper atmosphere. And we had this fiery, violent ride through the atmosphere at 8 kilometers per second. The parachutes opened, they threw us all over the place. Eventually, we smacked into the ground, and we hit so hard that we bounced, and we rolled, and we flipped over. And now my window was pointed down at the ground. And out of my window, I remember seeing a rock, a flower, and a blade of grass. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm home. And what was really, really interesting about being home after 6 months in space was I was home, but I was in Kazakhstan. And so to me, at that moment, my home wasn't just Houston, Texas, in America, where I lived with my family at the time. My home was Earth. And what I really want us to get away from this conversation that we're going to have is that our definition of that word home has profound implications for how we solve problems, how we treat each other, how we treat our planet, and expanding and broadening the word home, the definition of that word home, does not come with it a requirement to forget about where we come from, what our national, cultural, religious background is. It simply means seeing those things in the context of the bigger picture, and seeing those things in a planetary picture. And so that's really what I wanted to frame our conversation this time. So.
This is amazing. I really have what's your opinion from Kazakhstan after the landing of the Antrax, and I was amazed that somebody can stay for 6 months and be still able to walk after that on space. But let me start here. Ron, I'm going to use your own words now. The key is we, you say. We have within our grasp the resources and technology to solve many, if not all, of the problems facing our planet. We live in a world where the possibilities are limited only by our imaginations and our will to act. It is within our power to eliminate the poverty, the suffering that exists in our planet. Can you please here be a little bit more specific? How do you believe that this vision can come true? What can we do about this as a planet, as a nation?
Yeah, I got into this routine when I was on the space station during my 6-month mission, where I would almost say goodnight to the Earth. When my day was over, my tasks were over, I would float over to this part of the space station called the cupola. And the cupola is this windowed observatory on the bottom of the space station. And I would just take some time to gaze at the Earth. And as I would take in incredibly beautiful view, this indescribably beautiful view that is our planet, I would routinely be hit in the gut with a sobering contradiction between the beauty of our planet on one hand and the unfortunate realities of life on our planet on the other hand. We all know that there's people in the world that don't have enough food to eat. The clean water to drink, the poverty, the conflict, the strife that exists on our planet. And I did launch into space with the belief that right now, as you said, we already have all the technology, all the resources necessary to solve many, if not all, the problems facing our planet. So I spent a good deal of my time Earth gazing, pondering the question, if that's true, why do they still remain? And I think the seeds to the answer to that question were planted about 3 years earlier on my first space mission. On the third spacewalk of that space mission, my feet were clamped to the end of the space station's robotic arm. And with me attached to the arm, I swung through this maneuver that we call the windshield wiper, which took me across a big arc across the top of the space station and back. And so at the top of this arc, I was about 30 meters above the space station, looking down at the space station against the backdrop of our just indescribably beautiful planet, 400 kilometers. And the sheer beauty of that scene took my breath away. It was probably the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. But more striking, I think, than the beauty of it was the incredible human accomplishment that the International Space Station represents. You have to realize that 15 nations, some of these nations weren't always the best of friends, some were on opposite sides of the Cold War, opposite sides of the space race, some fought wars against each other. But somehow, these nations found a way to set aside their differences and do this amazing thing in space. And as I hovered up there with the space station, I wondered what the world would look like if we could bring that same level of cooperation, that same level of collaboration, and bring it down to the Earth's surface and try to use that to solve some of the biggest, seemingly intractable problems that we face on our planet. And so I believe that the reason why we still face so many critical issues, so many critical problems on our planet, is not because we don't have the resources, it's not because we don't have the technology, the knowledge, the wisdom to solve it. It's because we have not to date learned how to effectively work together on a planetary scale. I heard a statistic that there's about 20 million organizations in the world that are trying to improve life on Earth. And that's the good news. That's wonderful that there's millions of organizations, which represents even tens of millions or hundreds of millions of people that are trying to make a difference on the planet. But I think we all know, for the most part, these organizations are not working in a coordinated, efficient manner. They're not. There's duplication of effort. There's lack of efficiency. There's lack of good that these organizations could be making if they were working more together. And I think a perfect example, a shining example of international cooperation is the International Space Station. And what made the International Space Station work is when we approach a challenge. And in this case, we approach the challenge of flying in space and building the largest, most complex, most complicated structure ever built, and to build it in space. When we were faced with that challenge, we didn't start with a foundation of fear. We didn't start with a foundation of distrust. We started with a foundation of awe and wonder, the awe and wonder of space exploration. And when you start with a foundation of awe and wonder, it opens up the mind, it opens people and organizations up to further collaboration. And I think that's what we've seen in the International Space Station. And so, like I said, I think this is a perfect example of operation now is to realize that we live in just an indescribably beautiful, indescribably complex, interrelated, interdependent ecosystem that we call Earth. And starting from that foundation point, we should be able to attack these problems with a lot more effectiveness.
Okay, great. It's nice to hear all of this. So as you also said, we are all interconnected, we are all in this together, and we are all a family. Now, if I would ask you something more specific about Asteroid Day now, what can we do in order to protect our planet from potential hazardous asteroids in the near future? like Neos, near asteroids or near objects? Is there a possibility to protect our planet in the time? If something happens?
Of course. Yes, of course. And again, starting with a collaborative mindset that this is not one organization or one country, this is all of humanity coming together to basically establish a planetary defense to protect our planet from asteroids. You know, asteroids are a really interesting phenomenon that really good example of how to attack a problem. Because if there was an asteroid that was big enough that it would wipe out every living thing on the planet, and it was heading towards the Earth, we wouldn't have to send Bruce Willis and a whole team of astronaut heroes to blow the asteroid out of the sky. First of all, that wouldn't work. But if we knew about the asteroid sooner, if we had enough time, we could send a small spacecraft, and with the size or with the force of a feather, just give that asteroid a tiny little nudge. But that nudge, of course, of travel throughout space to Earth could result in thousands of miles of this distance, saving every living thing on the planet. And so, what it points to a number of things. It points to the need for an early warning detection system, obviously, to know about these things beforehand. But it also serves as an example of how to solve other problems as well. Because I think deep down inside, almost every person on the planet wants to leave this place a little bit better than they found it. At the moment, almost everybody has that in their heart, that they want to improve life on Earth. But I think what prevents a lot of people from actually acting on that need and doing those things is they feel like they can't make a difference. And part of that is because we have this very short attention span. We have this, I need to save the world tomorrow type of attitude. But the truth of the matter is, every single day, we make a number of nudges, not just to the trajectory of our own lives, but the trajectory of all of humanity and all living things on the planet. And so every action we take, every word we say, everything that we do, nudges trajectories in either a good way or a bad way. And at the end of the day, when you turn out your lights and it's time to go to sleep, at the end of the day, all you need to responsible for is, did you make positive nudges and negative nudges, and extrapolate that over, how that ripples out over time, that creates, we are so much more powerful, each and every one of us is so much more powerful than we can even imagine because of the impact that happens as it ripples out. So I think, use an asteroid as an example of that is really appropriate. It is within our power to protect the planet from many things, including asteroid attacks, and not asteroid attacks, but asteroid impacts. But the only way we're going to do that is by figuring out ways to set aside our differences and work together towards a bigger plan.
So thank you very much. So Ron, do you think that we have already the last 5 years that now is this Asteroid Day movement, have we created a global consciousness, let's say, a global consciousness about potential disasters to solve in peace, all nations together somehow? Or will be only NASA and ESA and the Russians and the Japanese somehow? What do you think? Is it possible to cooperate by such a project to push a big or small asteroid far away from in space from us?
Yeah, I think there's been tremendous ground covered in getting the word out and to just putting it in the public's mind that there's ways that we can protect ourselves from asteroids. But I think we have so far to go. I think it's not in the common language. It's not in day-to-day. People are not thinking about that. A good thing and a bad thing is how movies portray it, for instance. So, movies that portray, the potential end of the world because an asteroid is coming, serve us well because they make us aware that that's a possibility and it's something that we need to plan for. But usually the approach that's taken is some small group of heroes rise to the challenge and save the world. But that's not going to happen. What's going to happen is the world has to save itself. The world has to come together beforehand before we have this disaster looming in the next couple of weeks or months, and plan for it now. And so I think all of us have a responsibility to communicate the reality of the solar system that we live in as much as we can. We live in a solar system where there's many objects that are traveling at very high rates of speed that create tremendous damage to the Earth, if not destroy the Earth, if it were to have an impact. All you have to do is look at all the craters on the moon as an indication of how often things will hit us. So our atmosphere gives us some protection, but it doesn't give us enough protection.
So do you think that we must have better brains, for example, like dinosaurs, 65 million years ago, in order to cooperate? The dinosaurs have not cooperated together in order to avoid the big or small asteroid that have hit the Earth 65 billion years before. So how long time do we need in order approximately to avoid such potential smaller or bigger disaster on our planet? Do we need 5 years, 1 month, 7 years, 10 years? We hear many different versions of that subject. How much time do we need to prepare ourselves, if we know?
I think the real answer is we don't know. We don't know. We map a very, very small percentage of the asteroids that are crossing the Earth's orbit, and the vast majority of them we're not tracking and we don't know about. And so there could be a potential disaster in the next 5 minutes, or the next 50,000 years. We don't know at this point. So the most prudent course of action would be to assume that one is coming our way soon, and we should put everything we can into protecting ourselves from that, because we don't know when it's going to come, but it is going to come. And so the more we do up front, the better prepared we'll be.
Okay, let's go now, Ron, to another relative topic about asteroids. We have to speak already about the bad guys. Let's speak now about also the good guys, about asteroids. Do you believe that asteroids can become the future for humanity in order to, as mining resources, for the colonization of our solar system? Can we do that in the near future, in the next decades, to mining asteroids in space and use these precious metals in order to build colonies in the asteroid belt or on Mars, on the moon, etc.? Is it possible?
Yes, it's not only possible, I think we have to do it. And if you look at our population growth right now, we're on track to have about 10 million people on the planet by 2050, right? And so if that 10 million people have the same level of resources and same lifestyle that folks are accustomed to in developed nations, for instance, that will destroy the planet in the process. So we can't have that. So we have, you don't have to be in space to realize that we live on a planet of finite resources, and we need to do something to reduce the rate that we're using up non-renewable resources. But in addition to that, the resources have to come from somewhere. And so if we're going to reach an equilibrium on our population and be able to lift the entire population out of poverty, which I think is possible, and to give everybody a quality of life that they should have, which I think is possible, then it's quite likely that we're going to need to use the abundant, unlimited resources that are already available in space to help facilitate that. For instance, we can set up solar farms on the moon and have rovers that chug across the lunar surface and are basically laying down solar panels as they go, partially using the regolith, the soil of the moon. And then these solar farms can send that energy, that electricity back to the Earth, and so we don't have to have coal-fired plants, on the Earth, and we can decrease the amount of carbon dioxide they don't, and other greenhouse gases and pollutants. that go into the atmosphere. So I think a probable requirement for humanity to reach a good equilibrium level of population will be make use of resources that are in space, including it on asteroids.
Okay, great. This is good to hear from you, from your part. Let me now ask you, Ron, about your own vision for the future of humanity on our planet and about our solar system. What do you think? Is possible to colonialize Mars, Moon, the next decade? Or maybe later, maybe after some decades? NASA is in this project. Also, there are also private American investors in this project, like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. What do you think? Who can come first there?
So I think it's going to be very important that we colonize the moon and eventually Mars and other locations in the solar system. But we can't do it because we're escaping a dying Earth, right? That's not the reason to colonize. So what we need to do is, as we're looking to colonize, to have permanent human presence on different parts of the solar system, we need to be making sure that we can have a livable Earth and make sure that life support systems on our planet are able to sustain the population of our planet. There's not going to be an escaping to Mars, for instance. That doesn't make any sense. And if that were the case, our resources would go in the wrong direction in that case. So the famous astronomer Carl Sagan, for the foreseeable future, the Earth is where we make our stand. And that's a true statement. That doesn't mean we can't go explore elsewhere. It doesn't mean that we can't start to colonize elsewhere in the solar system. But our primary focus needs to be on helping our biosphere to return to a healthy biosphere, to have not only sustainable approaches, but restorative approaches, right? So if we have a planet that, say, by 2050, 50% of the planet is protected, right? It's protected as an ecosystem. Then once we establish that, then I think we could really start thinking about very large permanent colonies and human presence elsewhere in the solar system.
Okay, thank you. It was clear. I want now to ask you about something that concerns also you and every future astronaut. What education, in your opinion, and training do you believe that is will be asked in the future for any future astronaut to do? He would be only a scientist, a geologist, I don't know, physicist, astronomer. What task do we need to have to be educated in order to become an astronaut for the next generation?
Yeah, I think traditionally, well, if we go back 50 years, then astronauts were primarily test pilots, military test pilots, but then eventually it got opened up more and more. So for the last 15, 20 years, astronauts come from all walks of life, right? We have astronauts that are scientists and physicians, veterinarians, teachers, chemists, and obviously engineers. And what all of these professions have in common, what all of these people have in common is, first of all, they have professions that have some type of technical, science or technology aspect to them, because that's always going to be a requirement in space, right? But they also have in common that all of these people excelled in whatever field they were in. And so when young people ask me, what should I do to become an astronaut? I say, well, find something that you truly love to do that, and be the very, very best you can at it. And hopefully, if that thing that you truly love has a technical aspect that can be used to solve problems, because a lot of the problems we face on Earth and a lot of the problems we face in space have technical solutions. So if you have a technical skill set to be able to provide it, then that's really helpful. So I think the more people that we get to fly in space, the bigger our options we get to have in space, the broader the experience base, the broader the talent, skills, and expertise that we're going to need when we get there. So I think my answer doesn't change. It's, you know, find what it is you do and be the very best you can at it. And you know, if you're the best in the world at something, you got a pretty good shot no matter what it is.
This is true. This is very wise. I also believe that make what you love, and if you are the best, you will get your chances maybe to become an expert in your field and also maybe an astronaut. Who knows? Now I will change a little the topic. I have seen all your activities the last decade, let's say, the last couple of years.